All right, so here we are. We up in here. You know what it is. You know what we do is Trump and the GE. I'm Shock Exchange from Mr. Mitchell, of course, and this is Trump and the GE. Congratulations, man, you played yourself. So that's my take. We'll see what Mr. Mitchell thinks. But anyway, so it's been a while. A
Been a
lot of
long
things have
while.
happened. A lot of things have happened since our last show. Looks like they're putting pressure on former President Donald Trump. Um, uh, one of the last shows we talked about was with I guess with Alvin Bragg, who was looking at some of his
Hmm.
business dealings. I know Letitia James is looking at his tax returns, and he's been investigated for an election interference in Georgia and also in Washington D.C. And so looks like people are trying to jump the gun and keep his name off the ballot. But as far as the economy is concerned, I don't really have a whole lot to say. It's hard for me to really look at the vital signs of the economy until the Fed noise goes away. And the Fed has been hiking interest rates, which has had an effect. They're trying to stop runaway inflation, and it's had an effect on the overall economy. Now it looks like the interest rate hikes will subside. Will they cut rates? Who knows? I think they'll probably cut rates in probably the second half of this year at some point. But I know jobs report is coming out tomorrow, and at this point, it's really all about the stock market. Will the stock market go up? It's going to record highs, but as far as the vital signs of the economy, it's hard to really say until the Fed noise subsides. I think you'll see maybe some like spending in commercial real estate may slow, which may have an effect. But right now, I think it's hard to really look at the vital signs of the economy. We've already said that we were in a recession a couple of years ago, and the Biden administration changed the definition of recession. So um,
Hmm.
we'd look to Biden or the Fed to figure out if we're in a recession. I have a feeling we won't be until after the election, regardless of what the definition is. So that's sort of my take.
No, it's I agree that one, yeah, it's been a I feel like this has been a long time coming. I don't know how many times the Earth has spun on its axis since the last time we chatted. It feels like not only a new year has taken place, but so much has happened. I almost feel like a new decade is taking place because every day you wake up, something monumental is happening. But we are. I agree that I think we see kind of those first cuts as far as the economy sometime between Q2 and Q3. I think the very least we see two, possibly three, depending on the aggressiveness of bank repayment. One of the things that the Fed hasn't really at least talked about or popularized, although that's certainly relative when it comes to the Fed. But I feel like these days, in the last few years, especially post COVID, more and more people, average folks, are paying attention to what the Fed is saying and doing. And one of the things that the Fed did last year was essentially a liquidity program that opened up about 60 billion to commercial banks, and I believe the initial time period for that program was supposed to be 90 days, and they went through the entire liquidity in the first 30 days. So they expanded both the liquidity access to banks for borrowing as well as the time period. So they got about 90, they have about 90 billion plus on the books that will be expiring as of Q2 of this year. So to me, it's no coincidence as if whether it's us or you just kind of look back at the language that Jerome Powell and other Fed the lower Fed presidents were using Q1, Q2 of just 2023 where it was an aggressive language about recession. Then all of a sudden, we just took this sharp pivot, and I think it might look like a soft landing. They're like, what's the indication there, Mr. Powell? Well, credit cards. Like, oh, credit cards. You say you mean the same credit cards that most folks are maxed out? We have 30% default rates, potential default rates due in 2024. Those same credit cards you are using as a metric to determine that people are no longer utilizing credit cards. So you're taking that as a sign that there will be a softer landing. You know what I mean? Like it didn't make sense to me. But all of a sudden, we went from there is a recession on the horizon, even after they changed the language of recession, changed the definition of recession. They were still uh, very cautious and and just very prepared that there will be a recession in the country. And then we just took this pivot for no reason. So, that's my theory that that's one of the reasons that this pivot, as well as the rate cuts, are happening. Why? Because when you look at the top 20 banks who were the largest participants in this borrowing program, if you put a spotlight on the fact that the top 20 banks are not in a liquidity position to be able to repay over $100 billion on the books to the very entity that creates the funds, well, what are you going to have? A massive run on the bank and run on every bank. And to me, that will lead to a complete failure of our financial ecosystem. So too many things are reliant on the Fed making a more comfortable environment, a more rate friendly environment to sustain investor confidence. And I think if folks understand that the crux of our entire system, I mean, that's what the um, what am I blanking on, the Wall Street movement that happened in,
Occupy Wall Street.
thank you, Occupy Wall Street. That's what Occupy Wall Street, as well as the rise of cryptocurrency, was all about. That we understand that the entire system is predicated on one thing, and that's just belief, right, within that system. So as soon as that belief gets massively eroded, it turns against us in a very practical way, not just a theoretical way, not just a way to debate about fanciful terms and kind of hoping and wishing assets will increase even by way of cryptocurrencies. That's the issue with a lot of cryptocurrencies, is that they have not made their way into practical application. And that's what's holding back a lot of frankly, the globe from using Bitcoin as the primary store of value as opposed to the US dollar or their country's primary currency. So, in other words, investor confidence is still at the heart of our financial ecosystem, and it's still a very fragile thing. So, I think that's the reason why we've seen this, really unjustified pivot by the Fed. To your point, we're seeing, you know, indices are looking at, all-time highs, like getting close to all-time highs, and we haven't even gotten the first rate cut yet. So, in other words, what's that expectation that 2024, especially coming up to the expected cut, and certainly when the cut happens, is going to be a boom. And we're going to get into these massively overvalued assets. Some are going to definitely ride that wave, but is no indication of what's happening in the real economy. wages did increase over eight by 8% real wage growth. But when we look at uh, real inflation, we're talking about north of 24%. And certainly, as we've stated time and time again on the soapbox of this show, that when you tighten the focus on certain individual assets like food, you're talking about triple digits inflation. So, and that's not just inflation. That is a combination of inflation and corporate greed.
Right.
My grapes went up from $1.29 a pound to now $4.99 a pound in real dollars and cents. That is a triple digit increase that I'm looking at. So, the purchasing power of real wage growth is still largely negative. Job reports did come out. Job losses, jobless claims were lower than expected. We're seeing a pullback on some of the challenger cuts, but that was still 35,000 jobs that were cut as opposed to the 45,000 previous in the previous quarter. But that's still over 70,000 jobs just in those two reports alone. So I think one of the things that makes it difficult to really uh, make a distinct stand is because the width between the have and the have-nots is growing much wider, and with a clear distinction. There are folks that are actively engaging in the economy. It is a boon for them. So, high earning employees, certainly entrepreneurs with even small businesses north of 2 million annual revenue or so, and able to pay employees, able to pay themselves a comfortable pay, they are able to participate in this asset inflated economy, whereas those that are not within that section, they're largely suffering. So you're seeing a distinct wide berth between classes, and I think that's why it's becoming increasingly difficult to really put a pulse and say, well, this is where the economy is going and what it should look like, because it truly depends on which side of the fence you stand on. That's going to determine, will you get to tap into further growth opportunities, or are you struggling to simply make ends meet?
Right.
Yeah, that's my long-winded 2 cents on.
Right. Right. And the halves are being reported by are being covered by the corporate media. So corporate media thinks everything's great as long as
100%.
corporations are doing well. And you have nobody speaking up for average Americans other than Trump and the G, pretty much. No politician, nobody speaking up for average Americans. They're all speaking up for their donors and the investor class. So we're back to Trump, by the way, and he's been in battle. He was in battle when he was the president. As soon as he got elected, I mean the backdrop. As soon as he got elected, the Russians did it. The Russians won.
Mhm.
Even Pusha T was saying the Russians did it in one of his rap songs. So when it gets to Pusha T's level, you know the Russians did it. And
Right.
then he's been impeached twice. And so he was saying we're gonna fight like hell after he lost the last election. And he was gonna challenge the election results, which is his right. But he was having these I guess these events where tens of thousands of people were showing up. I wasn't really following it. I did follow one in D.C. and then people rushed the Capitol building. I don't know if he told them to rush the Capitol building or what, but people rushed the Capitol building and now they're making a big deal about it. And they're trying. He's being investigated down in Georgia and also in D.C.
Right.
for election interference. And the results did look kind of squirrely, but now we're seeing that it may have been at abnormal results as far as the voting patterns because of the pandemic and all the different mail-in votes that may seem like it skewed the results somewhat. But and then you have Rudy Giuliani just got um, you know he lost a case for like $150 million where he's accusing these election workers of besmirching these election workers, and that they were derelict in their duties and so on and so forth. They just won a case against him. So, and then you had Dominion voting machines won against Fox, saying that they were
Right.
defaming them.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's clear that the election was not a fraud, the real election, and so looks like some of these states are jumping the gun in terms of taking Trump's name off the ballot. So I'm just going to read something from Colorado. It's from like about a week ago, which says the Colorado Republican Party on Wednesday appealed that state's Supreme Court decision that found former President Donald Trump isn't eligible for the presidency. The potential first step to a showdown at the nation's highest court over the meaning of a 155-year-old constitutional provision that bans from office those who engage in insurrection. So they're saying he engaged in insurrection, even though he hasn't been
Yep.
proven
Convicted.
to have done something right. So the first impact of the appeal is to extend the stay of the 4-3 ruling from Colorado's highest court, which puts its decision on pause until January 4, the day before the state's primary ballots are due at the printer, or until an appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court is finished. Trump himself has said he still plans to appeal the ruling to the nation's highest court. So he's going to appeal the ruling. And the Republicans they've appealed the ruling. I guess they create a stay for him to, I guess, remain on the ballot until like sometime in March or whatever. And then he's playing this game with Trump is trying to get the ultimate Supreme Court decision delayed to after the election when he can pardon himself. And then this guy Jack Smith, the prosecutor, and also the Democrats are trying to get it the decision before the election. So it's like all this big cat and mouse game. And so here's comments from some lady from Colorado, some politician from Colorado, on why they chose to take his name off the ballot. I'm going to try to share my screen. Right.
Would like to hear your reaction to what's happening in Maine. What do you make of Secretary Bellow's decision and her reasoning behind it?
Thanks for having me on, Stephen. I think in Maine, the Secretary of State makes determinations like this. By the way, in Colorado, I would also be in the place of making the determination if the lawsuit wasn't filed so early. But in Maine, I think Shanna Bellows made the right decision in agreement with the Colorado Supreme Court. Donald Trump incited an insurrection to try to steal the presidency from the American people. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment makes it very clear that elected officials can't do that and then serve in office again. And I don't believe there should be some loophole in the Constitution that puts only Donald Trump above the law and Constitution when he incites rebellion or incites an insurrection. The other thing I would say is I do think Secretary Bellows is brave and courageous. She is the first individual by herself having to make this decision. And we are acutely aware of the threat environment that we work in. So I commend her for her actions, and we'll see how the litigation inevitably plays out in the state of Maine.
Here's okay. Let's see. Now I'm gonna play the comments from the lady from Maine, the Secretary of State from Maine. I'm trying to share my screen. All right.
While under Maine law, the Secretary of State has the authority, indeed the obligation, I'm duty bound to make this determination. I laid out that the record demonstrates that, in fact, the events of January 6, 2021, which were unprecedented and tragic, were an insurrection in the meaning of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And finally, in reviewing the facts presented, the evidence, the law, the history, we determined under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment that Mr. Trump engaged in insurrection and therefore was disqualified.
Now, I have to say, not only is this an incredibly important decision, but it's a very brave decision. The Trump campaign has already come out attacking you. They have said that you are a virulent leftist and a hyper-partisan Biden-supporting Democrat.
First and foremost, it's important to know my oath to the Constitution, my obligations to the Constitution and rule of law come before any other consideration. No other factors could weigh on that decision and did not. I'm duty bound to both hold a hearing and make a rule. And under the law, there's a very compressed timeline in evaluating. I came to the conclusion that I could not, unfortunately or fortunately, wait for the United States Supreme Court to make a decision. The Maine law required me to issue that decision, which I did today.
Okay, this is what she said. So what I thought was very interesting. She said she mentioned the rule of law, but Trump hasn't been convicted of anything.
That's
the rule of law, and I don't know how she can be. He has to go before a judge and jury. That's the rule of law, not her her personal feelings or what an insurrection is. So first of all, I mean, do you think this was an insurrection? First of all, quickly.
I mean, to your first point, I feel like I can't get my mind wrapped around how this is a dangerous precedent. Dangerous precedent. Whether liberals or Republicans alike tend to want to stand on their square of having a society ruled by law and order. Yet here we are in real time looking at elected officials that are circumventing the and it's almost mind blowing. That's the part that had me stuck when she said, her first priority is the Constitution, and any elected official, uniformed individual takes the same oath. It's the first line. I think I mentioned it on the show several times. The first line in every oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States by all enemies, both foreign and domestic. And so to me, like I'm stuck on the very first line of the Constitution, and she's saying that the Constitution is her charge, yet she violated the very oath that she's claiming to be essentially charged by. Whether it was an insurrection, it's I don't know the legal definition, but whether, and I think the bigger question is, was Trump inciting said insurrection, or even if you want to call it a riot, it's almost treason, frankly, if on any level, or could be construed as treason if you are identifying a group of citizens that attacked a government entity. That can be construed as treason. So whether it's an insurrection, whether it was a riot, whether it was a couple of friends on a Sunday brunch that happened to be all in the same area, like the action was the action. And we saw those folks stomping over law enforcement, Capitol Hill police, blowing through a federal building. And as much as a lot of these same folks, when riots break out, primarily in Black neighborhoods, and what is the criticism? Oh, these people looting and breaking into buildings. So these private business owners have a right to defend these privately owned and insured buildings. Well, the same logic even more so applies to federal buildings. And we watch these same folks that use this same logic to criticize the frustrations that are often felt by Black folks that have very little power, exercise the little power that they do have, and they exercise their power in a similar manner, except their power is exercised against federal police agencies, against federal building, and can be seen as an attack on elected officials. All of the above can certainly be construed as treasonous behavior. I'm not a lawyer, so I'll let the lawyers argue what those consequences should be. But the thing that I do know is due process didn't happen. And whether you like him or not, whether you like Trump or not, on a personal level, a political level, doesn't matter. The thing that is the most important is that you have an individual who is afforded certain rights according to the Constitution, according to the amendments that have taken place over the last couple hundred years. Due process is one of those rights, regardless of race, regardless of whether you like someone or not. Due process is to exist. And if you have an individual that is not being afforded due process, then Houston, we have a Mickey flicking problem. And it is a huge problem that you have elected officials that are taking stances based on the lack of due process. We watched another individual out of the Republican Party that just got ousted out of the House. I think he's the first individual that has gotten voted out of Congress. I think he made history. And one of the issues was that Republicans, because they were so fed up with this guy's incessant lies, his spotted background, everything that this guy reported about himself, found out to be a lot. Like, I mean, everything. I think even his name was evidence to be a lie. Just nothing was truthful about this guy. And even Republicans had the pitchforks up. And this is their guy. But it was some of the Democrats that was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Although we agree that this guy should get the heck out of here, the thing that we still have to engage in is due process.
Right.
Even if we have hard evidence that this guy is a flat out fraud, we still have to engage in the process of due process. So if congressional members that have evidence that can nail this individual to the wall that is unquestionable are still forced to maintain the modicum of due process, then how is it that we shouldn't have that same expectation by those within states?
Right.
To me, that's the thing that during that whole two interviews was just my brain was just kind of stuck.
Right. I couldn't figure out how they came to this decision, but it seemed like a sleight of hand when she says we have to follow the rule of law and then don't follow the rule of law.
Right. That's what I'm like.
We have to be fair here. Say that it's like with those police officers when they say stop resisting, but you're not resisting.
Exactly. It's like
we need to follow the rule of law, but don't follow the rule of law. Like she's basically saying I'm the law in the state of Maine, and I didn't want to wait for I didn't want to wait for a trial or a verdict in a court of law. So apparently it was something she had to, and she's in a hurry to do it because she couldn't wait for like you said, due process or for a real a jury trial or trial by judge. So she had to take the law into her own hands, and that's the part that kind of had me flummoxed. Like, how can you possibly be the law? And you can't tell me she came to this decision on her own because it seemed like a copycat decision. Because a lot of these politicians aren't really, that brave. They're not going to go out on their own and think outside the box. So this decision came after the Colorado decision. So, and they're saying, some people saying that she actually went kind of like copied the Colorado language, like almost like verbatim, like she plagiarized it.
Right.
Well, I don't think you come to these type of cases where you actually these sort of legal briefs. I don't think you do your legal briefs on a regular basis, probably once every 100 and some years. But anyway, it seemed like a copycat decision once Colorado went. Now all of a sudden, I think West Virginia looked at it. Virginia looked at it. California looked at it. Now Maine actually followed Colorado's actions. The other thing is that the guy Johnson,
Mm-hmm.
the guy Johnson, he said this is a very brave decision.
yeah.
It just sounded like this is all partisan. He didn't say why it was brave. It was just brave. It's all partisan. It sounded like that's the same sort of chanting about we gotta resist Trump when Trump was running for office when he was running for re-election. We need to resist Trump because this is gonna happen. And that's gonna happen if we don't like Trump. So the same, these sort of the corporate media chanting in unison. And if people keep repeating this is a very brave decision, it's gonna be a very brave decision. He didn't really say why. And it seems like what she's kind of pandering to the Democratic Party and the corporate media who doesn't like Trump, and she knows that she has a groundswell of media support. Maybe not from the citizens, but definitely from the media. And that seems like what they're playing towards.
Well, we have to remember that it's not the voting public that gets the president in office. It's the electoral college, right? So the corporate marketing line, which is the point that you're making, and it's certainly evident, right? You're already getting to see a sneak peek at what the next year, really 9 months, is going to look like. And it's going to look like gonna vote blue no matter who again. But now voting blue is going to be assigned to being a brave act. It's going to be assigned to being courageous, having the bravery to vote blue no matter who in the face of opposition. And you already see the corporate talking points, right? You already see the strings being pulled. So it's certainly, like you said, there's no rhyme or why is this brave? Because once you begin to ask that and force people to answer, like, well, okay, great. What makes this act deemed a brave act? Well, then now you're forcing them to say, well, because she did it she did it by herself. Oh, so she didn't wait for due process. So we're calling the illegality of making a legal decision, circumventing an individual's right to due process, as brave. So then that means we would have to apply that same logic to the very same folks who, for right or wrong, you're demonizing on January 6th. So was it an insurrection, or was it just a bunch of brave folks that happened to meet up collectively and storm the Capitol?
Now,
you know what I mean? Like, that's
if they're saying
it gets us to a slippery slope. It goes both ways.
But neither one lady from Maine or the Secretary of State from Colorado mentioned anything about whether the people who actually physically engaged in so-called insurrection, whether they were given their due process, whether proper punishment has been meted out to them.
Right.
The actual actors, physical actors, haven't even mentioned whether they got off scot free or whether the proper punishment was meted out to them. They never mention it. And do you think a lot of this is just fear of Trump? They're just afraid Trump's gonna get reelected.
I think they're one, to me, it's something I don't have my pulse on the political landscape enough, but I'll just say over the last really 4 years, the thing that I've noticed is this strange dichotomy that I don't think, at least I've ever noticed in my near half century being on the planet. But maybe political historians can point out a similar time where a similar dichotomy existed, where it seems like utter chaos in the Republican Party. After Trump lost the election, you see this fracturing. Pointed to one example of that where Republicans have pitchforks against their own. They supported the likes of Sarah Palin and Mike Huckabee and all of these other folks, and regardless of what was coming out of their mouths, even though the things that were coming out of their mouths were some of the most untrue, one Google search away from just being flat out lies, and yet they still showed support. They still remained a united front. This is the first time that I've seen the Republican Party in such turmoil, where even amongst the voting base, right? Trump, I think largely, we've spoken to it, Trump largely alienated his original voting base. When he began speaking both in action, especially jobs, kind of outsourcing jobs, and speaking in favor of outsourcing jobs, and just taking a lot of actions that were opposite of what he said he stood for, alienated his original voting base. Republican Party, towards the end, especially I think during the Mueller investigation, you saw the Republican Party largely distancing themselves, coming out in front of interviews. I'm getting ready to call him the turtle. You know what I'm talking about. Lindsey Graham, I blanked for a moment there. Where the first time where you really start hearing him in blunt language separating him and the rest of Republicans from the Trump administration. They have not recovered from that time. But the other strange dichotomy to that is I have yet to see liberals capitalize on the fracture that's happening in the Republican Party. The thing that I will always say as an example of, if anyone wants to see the distinction between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, you take a Monday, you go to the RNC headquarters right there on Capitol Hill, one Monday morning, stand in the lobby at 7:30 a.m. and just watch, like just observe for the first hour to hour and a half of the day. See the activity that's happening, overhear the conversations, look at the way that people are dressed, look at the conversations and the way that they're having conversations. And then you take the following Monday and you go to the DNC. And I mean, if you show up at 7:30, nobody's going to be there. Show up at around 9:30, you get some stragglers coming in. And you take a look at those stragglers and you hear the conversations and the activity that's happening, and you will get a real world understanding of why the RNC is just a better well-organized machine than the DNC. And that's why Republicans galvanized their base with such speed. If folks want an example of that, look no further than the state of California. When they were challenging Governor Newsom, those folks needed 1 million signatures. They got that done in a few weeks. I think Governor Newsom was even underestimating the power of the organization level of the RNC. So my point is this, is that when you have such an organization that collectively is historically unified, and you see the thread pulled, and not only pulled, but you see an open earthquake, and these folks are disjointed, fractured, and you don't jump on that opportunity to then well oil your machine, grab some of their base. Hey, folks, let's re-gerrymander some of these districts. Let's let's re-adjudicate some of these laws that are on the books, whether through states' rights or federally. But in other words, I have yet to see any opportunism coming from the liberal side.
But they
And
don't. They
it's
don't. I mean, you have to have a. But you have to have
so,
a plan. You have to have a plan. You have to have results. They didn't take the White House because they had a plan or results. They just basically said, "Let's resist Trump." That was
yeah,
the only message.
it's
That was the
just
only message. They don't. They don't really have a plan. It's just let's resist Trump, and it's been waffling around for the past 4 years. I mean, Joe Biden hasn't really been. I don't think he's been that strong of a leader. They haven't had a plan. They haven't
no.
had a.
Joe
This is
Biden.
these are the 5 or 6 things we're gonna do. This is how. This is what we. This is the 4 things we accomplished, and this is 2 things we still have open. They don't. They haven't made a clear messaging to the country, and Biden has been kind of all over the place. So I mean, I hear what you're saying. They don't have the talent to do it, and they never had a plan to begin with other than resist Trump. And as far as the lady from
Yeah.
Maine, the Secretary of State from Maine, there was a Democrat came out against her and said, "Look, we're a nation of laws. Don't do this. This is silly. We are a nation of laws. I voted against Trump. I voted to impeach Trump, and I still think that we have to. He deserves due process. So that's even within the Democratic Party, they think it's a silly idea and it could backfire. Someone will have one more clip from Robert F. Kennedy and his thoughts on all these removing Trump's name off the ballot.
Mm.
I don't, I've been outspoken. I'm not a fan of Donald Trump's, and that's why I'm running against him. But I think it's I've been outspoken about criticizing the Colorado decision and the Maine decisions because, we have a democracy in this country. We don't have a banana republic. At least we're not supposed to. People ought to be able to vote for who they want to vote for. I don't want to beat Donald Trump. I believe that I can beat him in an election and I can beat him in a debate. And I want to do that fair and square. I don't want the playing fields slanted. I don't want to have an election where you get rid of a guy who, a large percentage of the American public want as their leader. And you're going to leave those people feeling angry and frustrated and justifiably so. I've read.
Okay. Okay. So he said a few things. He basically said he used words like fair and square. I want to beat Trump fair and square, and it looks like he's basically saying this is a ploy to take Trump's name off the ballot because you don't think we can beat Trump. I want to beat him fair and square. And apparently nobody thinks Biden can do it. Nobody thinks he can do it. That's why they're trying to take Trump's name off the ballot. He's saying that we're not a banana republic. But we are a banana republic. If you're taking his name off, the ballot, you take his name off the ballot, and because you you can't beat him in an election, you are a banana republic. You're taking the top candidate from the other side off the ballot. The last election, was kind of weird because of all these mail-in votes, and there was a constant barrage from the corporate media: resist Trump, Trump's bad, blah 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 blah. Where you basically pounding the American public over the head with resist Trump from major media outlets with no real analysis, just emotion. So he's saying that he's implying that that this isn't fair, what they're doing. And I can't remember the guy's name from Maine, a Democrat from Maine, said we are a nation of laws, which implied that the Secretary of State's actions were lawless. So I just want to get your reaction to what Mr. Kennedy said.
I mean, I'm in full agreement. We should have free and fair elections. I mean, that is part of what is certainly purported that this country and the establishment of a government was built on. It's fair and free elections. Now, history says otherwise, especially for Black folks. So we know the deal, but none of these folks have that history. Robert F. Kennedy isn't Black. Trump isn't Black. The AG of Maine isn't Black.
You just said a mouthful because a lot of African Americans are quiet. They know how we've been treating this country. You're gonna let them take Trump's name off the ballot and think that's a good idea. This is crazy.
And it's wild. Like that's so. My point is that they don't come from the same history where they should have a different view, other than what kind of American history books purport that this is what the country stands for, that this is what our Constitution was built on, was equality, was all men are created equal, that there should be no distinctions, that meritocracy exists. We should not have to be under the rule of law of a despot king, that we should have democracy. And if I'm from that same pedigree, then why shouldn't I believe that? And you're spitting in the face of that.
So did that guy. So did that guy Johnson, right? When he said this is a brave thing,
right? Like
a black guy said that.
What do you mean? Like, that makes no sense. And that's
this is coming from a black guy.
Right. The irony of it, right? Like, and so I'm in full agreement with what Robert F. Kennedy is saying, because again, it's a slippery slope. Logic works both ways. As soon as you essentially create an environment, which is what he's speaking to, where even logic is limited to just one side of the table, that in itself becomes an inequality. And once inequality is left to breed and fester, well, we already saw what happened on January 6th. Even before January 6th, we watched the FBI testify before Congress and say what is one of the main concerns of the FBI is the rise of militia across the country. They weren't worried about BLM. They're worried about the white dudes that are often former law enforcement, former military, taking the same skill sets into the civilian sector and building these organized groups of former and current combatants, and taking the same festering inequality, the results of that festering inequality, although it is ironic, certainly to folks that are not white males, that even white males are fed up with the felt inequality of their space. So with white males in the U.S., which arguably you can't point to another country, maybe with the exception of, well, I ain't gonna light up the podcast, get us canceled, but arguably the U.S. Is probably one of the only countries that was specifically established for the benefit of white men. That's who signed the Constitution. That's the only folks who is given credit to helping create the Constitution. You know, I don't care. You know, sure you have fun at you paid a couple $100 to go watch Hamilton, and you found out that that Madison was 1/16 Negro, but the one drop rule is a social fiction and a social fraction. So unfortunately, that don't count. It was primarily and only white men that is given credit to creating and signing the Constitution, thereby establishing the United States as a government entity. So there are very few countries on planet Earth where white men will ever have as much of an advantage over anyone who is not them in an environment. So if white men in the country that was established for and by white men are feeling the results of inequality, then you got a problem on your hands. In other words,
Right,
you have
right,
a
right,
large
right,
problem
right,
on your hands.
right, right.
So to go down this slippery slope, I'm not really seeing even the short-term benefit. Like, what, you know what I mean? Like, what is even the short-term gain by Democrats, liberals, essentially continuing this vote blue no matter who mentality, and peppering the coming 9 months with a similar mentality that is just resist Trump by all means, even
Right.
if we have to engage in illegality, even if we have to breed inequality, even if we have to engage in alienation of the frankly most powerful collective voting base, which continues to remain white men.
Right,
So
right, right.
you know what I mean? Like,
Right, and there's been all these sort of microaggressions, for lack of a better word. I call it microaggressions, where let's
right,
take down the statues, let's take down the flag,
right,
let's do
right.
that. And what's your end game? Because we want to do that. And now you have this election where all these mail-in votes. Trump said we're gonna fight like hell to take our country back. People go and storm the Capitol, blah 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 blah. Now you're taking Trump's name off the ballot, and so does Trump win if he gets to run again?
I think so. I
Okay.
think so. Like, there's been too much. There's just been too much chaos, too much turmoil. I think even, and this was kind of to my earlier point, because liberals and Democrats, even progressives, as you've seen kind of that whole progressive cohort that was coming in hot and heavy. AOC, Bernie, the what do they name them? The crew or whatever.
The squad.
Thank you, the
Why
squad.
do I know that? But anyway, I'm embarrassed.
Right.
I know that, by the way.
All of them have.
I got too much time on my hands.
All of them have fallen by the wayside, and they're back to the back benches and have largely fallen quiet. So my point is that you have not seen them capitalize, and because they fail to capitalize on this fracturing that has happened within the Republican Party and their voter base, they have, I think, ironically reunited to some degree the Republican voter base because they failed to step in as the leadership, embrace the opposite voter base to say, hey, you're dissatisfied with the Republican Party, you're dissatisfied with the Tea Party, you're dissatisfied with Citizens United and these other smaller voter bases, lobbying groups, and the like, and embracing some of those and looking to capture some percentage of those. Because there's a failure in leadership there, you've given those folks no other choice but to fall back to the very same party that they know, and essentially say, well, this is all we have left. So although we may have fallen disillusioned with Trump the first time, but because you got this fracturing going on and a failure to step in leadership across the aisle, you left us with no choice but to vote back in the guy who remains to be the only guy to seem to be willing to speak the truth.
Right.
To challenge the establishment and to challenge the very inequality that they were claiming Trump would bring. Because remember, that was the support. Oh, Trump is going to bring racism. Trump is going to bring Nazis back. Trump is going to bring anti-Semitism back. Trump is going to bring anti-blackness back. And to some degree, those groups felt emboldened and openly supported Trump, openly supported other Republicans, like what is it?
DeSantis?
Out of Florida.
DeSantis.
So, to some degree, those criticisms were true, but at the same time, again, I think that if Trump gets on the ballot, you see these same fractured groups reunite around, at the very least, certain issues.
Right. I think he's gonna. Yeah, I think he's gonna trounce Biden. Not even gonna be close. If his name's not on the ballot, does all hell break loose?
Oh, I think so. I think you see a fierce write-in campaign. Again, just because Republican Party is fractured, the tenets are still there. Democrats do not, I don't care where you're from, what state it is, Democrats collectively do not have the same organizing power. They do not know how to galvanize their base, to get those folks to the polls, to walk across aisles the same way that Republicans do. I gave the story a while back, an example of a good friend of mine who ran as a Republican on a council ticket, lost the race not even 20 minutes after accepting the loss to the Republican candidate. Were those same Republicans that supporters that backed the Republican winner at her doorstep, pitching her a proposal to come on the Republican ticket, showing her exactly where she polled and what her strengths were, and if she flipped to the other side, what donor amount that they will be able to get, what percentage of their voter base they strongly believe that that she would be able to capture, and with a strong, I don't want to say promise, but a strong word that if she were to flip, that they would be able to get her X amount of votes in X amount of time. Meanwhile, during her, I think like 6 to 8 months of raising awareness and canvassing on the Democratic ticket, she couldn't get anybody from the DNC to barely show up a phone call to even support. The whole point is that those same organizational skills, just because a fracture is in place, is not wholly lost on throughout the RNC and the Republican Party. Yeah, absolutely. I will not be surprised if Trump is not on the vote. They're going to get 80 million folks to write Trump in. I literally don't have any about that.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think also if his name not on the ballot, I think these people are gonna flip out.
Oh yeah.
I think there's already somebody went to the Supreme Court building in Colorado shooting up the place. I think
Yeah.
last week, a couple of days ago, or whatever.
Yeah.
So and then lastly, is this lady from Maine? Is she out here on a ledge by herself now? She quit out here by herself?
It's certainly like it's interesting, Colorado and Maine, right? Like it's not lost on me the electoral votes that come with Maine and Colorado. Not much on the line. They're not swing states. I'm not going to say that they're inconsequential, right? Because when a precedent is set, is just that, right? And any savvy AG, any savvy prosecutor, any savvy practitioner of the law will dig into the records, pull out a precedent from 80, 120 years ago, and argue that precedent before a court. So, irrespective of the size and influence of Colorado and Maine, they are setting a precedent. So we can't ignore that a precedent is being set. But as far as what is the impact short term over the next 10 months, I think it's very limited. It's not lost on me that Colorado and Maine don't carry a lot of electoral votes. They don't carry a lot of power, and they're not swing states. So, in terms of what's the risk for Colorado and Maine, relationally to like an Ohio, Michigan, Florida, Texas, California, New York, I think relationally very little is at risk. You know what I mean? I think maybe personally their careers, uh, that's the thing that they will probably benefit from getting known for, but also maybe taking some hits on the head, depending on who's in power. uh and maybe they'll have a long memory. Hey, you were the Yahoo that that set this precedent. So, but I just think overall relationally, little risk,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
potentially lot of upside and reward for them
yeah,
individually and personally.
yeah. I don't think this lady's gonna get what she thought she was gonna get out of this. I think she's kind of out here by herself. I think even some of the Democrats in her own state are saying, "Don't do this. This is silly. It's
Yeah,
undemocratic. Wait for Trump to get convicted of something before you try something like this." And I think you hear from Robert F. Kennedy, people who thought I don't think he had a legitimate chance of beating Trump, but even if he thought he did, this could galvanize people around Trump. You
yeah,
know, these silly
yeah.
moves, and because you keep putting his name out there, and you make it seem like you're afraid of him. You can't beat him politically, and so it could galvanize people more towards Trump. I think this lady just played herself. So that's basically it. That's Trump and the GE. Congratulations, Maine. You just played yourself, and we'll see you. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you.
All right. Peace.